Good afternoon. I had been wondering, say if you lived in Novosibirsk or in Tashkent during the Second World War, what were you told by the media? What did you get? What were they saying to you? There was not a single book in any Western language about this. So I decided I'll do it myself. I've been focusing on newspapers in particular, mostly in Russian language and in some texts of radio broadcasts. And I've consulted documents of the censor, located in Moscow mostly, and documents of the party apparatus, the Communist Party officials who checked and influenced the media. And I've highlighted a range of themes in this book. Each chapter basically deals with a certain theme or collection of themes. And one of the key findings that I've made, at least it's a finding I believe in, is that the propaganda was extremely centralized, much more than we perhaps thought. It was the case that we thought that the war was a time of somewhat loosening of control, but in fact, I see the opposite. It was much more centralized than we thought, and it was also much more centralized than, for instance, in Nazi Germany. In Nazi Germany, Goebbels did not decide every little detail, but I believe in the Soviet case, it was basically true that almost everything stemmed from Stalin. You see him actively editing texts, consulting, having a look at the newspaper galleys. Not every day, but he certainly was very interested. And censorship was extremely tight, very tight. What this resulted in was a media that lacked the real voices of people. It was a very artificial and stilted language. Now, why was this the case? I think this was the case because whatever Stalin might say that the population needed to be mobilized, his real purpose was to control the population. That was the paramount goal. Now, would this have been a problem at the time? After all, the country was at war, it was being invaded, and moreover, the invaders were murdering people. It was not an ordinary war. Well, in some ways, the centralized nature of the propaganda was not a problem. For instance, they began all vigorously to promote the notion that the motherland was in danger. The motherland was a brilliant concept because it was very vague. What kind of motherland? It wasn't stated. So you could feel and imagine something with it. And the danger, of course, was real. Now, at first there was a lot of skepticism, but gradually people began to realize, yes, there is a real danger. They talked with refugees and realized what the propaganda is saying generally is true. They are killing these people. They are gassing them. But I see a big problem still with this propaganda. And in fact, you could argue that in this aspect, it actually failed. I'm talking here about labor. Getting people to work hard under very difficult conditions. There was a lot of language that very much resembled the pre-war period. Socialist competition, very boring language, evasive language, artificial letters by people, which had been distorted beyond recognition. And again, the extreme censorship, which in my view really prevented a lot of people from being mobilized. And this was something that local authorities often became aware of. But the central apparatus pushed through this central line. One complaint I can quote: the editors of one newspaper in the city of Rostov wrote to Moscow, thanks to censorship, Molot, our newspaper, has turned into a pious old crazy woman. You won't find in it anything whatsoever that reflects our work in strengthening the defense of the city. Our descendants will wonder. For 16 months, the enemy was at the gates. People were fighting, but the newspaper says nothing about it. So that's what I want to emphasize to you in this brief introduction. I see some successes in the propaganda, but I also see very many problems. And the effectiveness is something that we should not take for granted at all. On the contrary, I'm highly skeptical about its impact. Not so much with regard to the appeals to patriotism or in reports about atrocities, but on a whole range of other issues. I'll leave it at this.